The most devastating thing that can happen to any company is to have an employee lose their life, at a facility. And from a personal perspective, it's impactful. The family's impacted. The work, coworkers are impacted. There's generally some type of a disruption in operation as a result, of kind of the injury, that occurred, and that can be very costly as well. So there's a ripple effect.
So look, Doug, I think that the first thing I kind of want to touch on is the high cost of safety negligence. We'll just jump right into it. If you can, I kind of want to talk about some of the financial and human impacts of safety violations within steel. I mean, there's some cases from an OSHA compliance standpoint, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for amputation risks and among some or standard just record keeping fines. So, talk to me a little bit about your experience with some of the financial burdens that steel specifically faces day to day.
Yeah, I mean, it's across the spectrum, really. You think about, OSHA has a very comprehensive set of regulations that a lot of the regulations are very applicable to the types of hazards that steel manufacturing companies have to deal with, and the workers as well. Some companies have gotten themselves, because of maybe not paying attention or not enforcing safety procedures the way they should. Yeah, I've gotten caught over the last 20, 30 years, and there's been very sizable fines that actually have been very impactful, I think, to some of the steel companies. But really, the true cost of safety, in a manufacturing environment like steel production, really sets in, one, your employees. The most devastating thing that can happen to any company is to have an employee lose their life, at a facility. And from a personal perspective, it's impactful. The family's impacted. The work, coworkers are impacted. There's generally some type of a disruption in operation as a result, of kind of the injury, that occurred, and that can be very costly as well. So there's a ripple effect, of costs around, making sure that employees are functioning safely in the work environment.
Yeah. I mean, neglecting safety measures can certainly lead to catastrophic outcomes, and in some cases are life-threatening, and of course significant financial penalties for non-compliance. Are kind of the protocols that regulatory bodies or OSHA enforces to keep workers and companies compliant. Can you walk me through some of those incidents that you see most common in steel?
Yeah, there's a wide range of types of hazards that you can get exposed to. I would say the most common type of injury is probably strains and sprains. So it'd be more in the ergonomics case. But you also have struck by, struck against, where you have a high you move a lot of things, including product, but also as you're doing maintenance, as you're restocking supplies, as you're putting consumable products in place that are used to produce steel, like refractories, things like that. You have a high concentration of people walking and mobile equipment, and in some cases that mobile equipment may have some blind spots, and it just by the nature of the process, it has to interact, very close quarters to where people might actually be walking as well. You use large transportation systems like rail. So you have an in-plant rail system where you move rail cars around, and you switch cars in and out and move generally product through rail, but there's a wide range of rail hazards that exist. And then kind of in the front end, the steel production process, you're dealing, mostly with liquid metal, and the integrated steel making processes start with, melting iron ore into molten iron, and then, moving it into a steel shop and converting that into liquid steel. And then it doesn't actually become solidified till you go through some type of a casting process. So you've got the whole front end of an integrated plant, that's dealing with, high temperature steel or iron. In a mini mill facility, it starts with kind of revert scraps that are charged into an EAF and melted, with electrical energy. But still, you have to transfer that liquid steel to a casting process and roll it in order to get it into a solidified shape. Hazards inherent to just liquid metal, are somewhat unique to the steel industry. And then you have kind of byproduct gases that, can be toxic, carbon monoxide being one. But you also deal with a lot of inert gases, could create oxygen deficiency type exposures, especially in confined areas. So the list goes on, but those are some of the key hazards that you deal with in a steel plant.
Do you have any real life examples that you've heard of or have seen, or anecdotes that for some of the guests that may be listening today that they could, I guess, better understand?
In the steel industry, over the time that I spent in the steel industry, and even predating my time in the steel industry, you hear about certain types of really bad incidents that occurred. In some cases, with multiple fatalities. And fundamentally, when you do the investigation into those, serious incidents and fatalities, you generally have a high level of management involved. You generally have some type of worker involvement, whether it's a non-union shop or the union safety reps. You go through kind of a very detailed investigation. The first thing you try to do is recreate the events that led up to the incident that resulted in the serious injury or fatality. And then as you you use a risk matrix, you try to determine how do you best mitigate those circumstances that led up to that. And oftentimes that's administrative controls. So it's retraining the employees or rewriting safe job procedures, or maybe you put alert signs that are out there in the area to remind people of certain hazards. Could be maybe paint walkways or restricted areas where people can't go without certain PPE. You may even bolster the type of PPE that employees are required to wear. So you do a lot. You take an extensive list of actions, and you generally get really good support in order to drive those actions, out onto the shop floor. I think the one thing that I've been exposed to in my time with Ottman is the ability to now integrate technology that allows you to, one, know when an event occurred, exactly precisely when an event occurs, and being able to respond, accordingly. Oftentimes, these serious incidents or fatalities actually are because the worker might be performing a work activity and be in distress, and the coworkers aren't aware that that employee is in distress. So having the ability to know when the event occurs and when the employee goes into distress, and then being able to go and locate that person, more quickly because of technology, can help that tremendously.
That's interesting.